The cafeteria at Montgomery Industries gleamed like a hotel lobby. Glass walls, marble floors. The faint hiss of espresso machines blending with polite conversation. Hannah Reynolds sat near the corner, clutching a resume folder she had already read 10 times. This was the biggest interview of her life. Her palms were damp, her heartbeat steady, only because she forced it to be. She adjusted her maternity blouse, 6 months pregnant and visibly showing, unaware that a small gold sticker reading, "Thank you," had stuck to the back of her cardigan, probably from the prenatal class flyer she'd been holding earlier. The sticker caught the light each time she moved, invisible to her, but not to others. A man a few tables away noticed it. Mid-30s, composed, tailored navy suit. He hesitated before standing. This sort of person is used to solving problems quickly, quietly. He walked toward her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low, courteous. "I think you." Hannah turned, startled. The stranger gestured faintly toward her chair, trying to keep his tone gentle. "Wait, there's something." He reached to remove the sticker before she could misunderstand, but she did. Her hand came up faster than thought. Slap. The sound cracked through the cafeteria like a gunshot. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks froze in midair. The man didn't move, just blinked once. The shock was almost imperceptible. Hannah's eyes widened. Oh my God. Her face burned red as realization dawned. The tiny sticker glimmering between his fingers. Proof of her mistake. I thought you were." He raised a hand, not angry, just stunned. "It's fine." His tone was calm, but the silence around them wasn't. From nearby tables, whispers bloomed. Like wildfire. Did she just slap him? Who is he? Hannah mumbled an apology, grabbed her water bottle, and fled toward the restroom. Her reflection in the mirror looked like someone she didn't recognize. Flushed, wild-eyed, completely mortified. She dabbed her face with a paper towel, one hand instinctively resting on her belly, forcing a shaky laugh. "Good job, Hannah," she muttered under her breath. First impression of the year. Outside, the cafeteria returned to its hum, though one pair of eyes still watched the door she disappeared through. Eyes that were neither angry nor amused, just quietly assessing. 2 hours later, the same eyes were waiting behind a glass wall in a corner office 18 floors up. "Next candidate, please," said the HR coordinator. Hannah took a breath, smoothed her hair, and walked in. She froze. Sitting across the sleek desk was the man from the cafeteria, the one she'd slapped. For a heartbeat, the world shrank to the sound of the air conditioner. He didn't speak immediately. He simply looked at her resume, then back up, his expression unreadable. "Miss Reynolds," he said evenly. "Please have a seat." Her knees felt weak. "Sir, I think there's been." He raised a hand. "Let's start with what you can bring to this company." His tone was polite but cool, the professional calm of someone entirely in control. Hannah tried to answer, but every word tangled. She mentioned her degree, her experience at a small consulting firm, her strengths in project management, but her voice quivered with the memory of that slap. And the unspoken worry, would he judge her for being pregnant? 4. Needing maternity leave soon? He listened without interruption, pen tapping once against his notepad. Precise, rhythmic. When it was over, he closed the folder. "Thank you, Miss Reynolds," he said. "That will be all." No warmth, no malice, just finality. She nodded, gathered her papers, and left the room, trying to keep her dignity intact. The HR assistant gave her a sympathetic look that said everything. By the time Hannah reached the elevator, her rejection felt inevitable. Her phone buzzed before she even got to the parking lot. Subject, interview outcome. Body, thank you for your time, but we have decided to move forward with another candidate. She laughed under her breath. A short, hollow sound. Thank you. Huh. Fitting. The automatic doors hissed open to the gray drizzle outside Austin's skyline. She walked through it without an umbrella, the company tower looming behind her like a mirror of every wrong turn she'd ever made. What she didn't see was the man in the top-floor office watching from behind the tinted glass, still holding the resume she'd left behind, his thumb resting on the word coordinator. That night, Hannah sat in her small apartment, surrounded by silence. The hum of her fridge was the only sound. Her laptop screen glowed faintly, showing job listings she'd already applied to. One hand hovered over the trackpad, the other rested on her belly where the baby kicked. Softly, she closed the laptop instead, resting her forehead against her arm. Then her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Miss Reynolds. The voice was female, professional. This is the HR department at Montgomery Industries. Mr. Hardy would like to offer you a temporary position in our operations division, just until the next administrative cycle. Hannah blinked. Mr. Hardy? Yes. Michael Murphy, our CEO. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. The man she had slapped. I see. It's part-time, the woman continued. Flexible hours, considering your situation. But it could open other opportunities if things go well. Would you be interested? Hannah's laugh was small, but real this time. Part disbelief, part curiosity. Sure, she said, quietly. Why not? When the call ended, she looked at her reflection in the dark window, tired, nervous, visibly pregnant, but with something new flickering beneath the surface. Resolve. Let's not screw this up twice, she whispered. Outside, the city lights blurred against the rain-streaked glass like thousands of tiny gold stickers, saying thank you back at her. The elevator chimed softly, announcing her arrival. 3 days after that humiliating interview, Hannah Reynolds stepped back into the Montgomery Industries building, not as a coordinator, not even as a candidate, but as a temporary clerk in the company's operations division. The lobby looked different now, colder. Maybe it was her, not the place. The marble floors that had once gleamed with opportunity now just reflected her hesitation. She took a breath and tightened her grip on her canvas tote bag, her resume folder still inside, a silent reminder of what she hadn't become. The HR coordinator greeted her with professional warmth, the kind reserved for temp hires. Welcome back, Miss Reynolds. You'll be working downstairs, operations level. It's quiet there. The subtext was clear. Out of sight, out of mind. Hannah nodded. That's fine. She didn't ask why the CEO had offered her this. She wasn't sure she wanted to know. The elevator doors opened to a narrow corridor lined with gray walls and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Operations division wasn't glamorous. It was the basement of corporate ambition. Rows of supply shelves, boxes labeled with project codes, and a single long desk, occupied by 2 employees who barely looked up as she entered. One of them, a tall woman with silver glasses, gave her a polite nod. You're the new temp? Yes. Hannah Reynolds. Welcome to the paper graveyard, the woman said with a faint smile. Printers jam here more than people talk. Hannah managed a soft laugh, half from nerves. She took her seat at the far end beside a stack of unopened files taller than her computer monitor. When she powered on the system, an error message blinked. She restarted twice before it worked. Her reflection stared back at her in the black screen for a moment. Tired eyes, a growing belly, a quiet determination beneath the shame. She whispered, just keep your head down. Do the work. No mistakes. In the executive floor 18 stories higher, Michael Murphy sat in his office reviewing quarterly projections. His assistant entered with a quiet knock. Mr. Hardy, the new temp started this morning. Hannah Reynolds. He looked up briefly. Good. She's been assigned to the operations division as you requested. He nodded once, eyes fixed on the digital spreadsheet in front of him. But as his assistant left, Michael's gaze drifted toward the window, toward the faint reflection of himself against the skyline. That slap had echoed longer than it should have. Not because of pride, but because of what it revealed, that his presence had come to intimidate people. That somewhere along the climb to power, he'd forgotten how to be human. Still, he told himself this wasn't a charity gesture. It was a test, for her, and maybe for him. By late afternoon, Hannah's shoulders ached from sorting files older than her college diploma. Each folder smelled faintly of paper dust and stale toner. She alphabetized, labeled, logged, mechanical motions with no room for thought. The baby shifted occasionally, reminding her why she needed this job, any job, When the overhead lights flickered, she glanced at her watch. 6:42 p.m. Everyone else had gone home. She reached for another box and almost tripped when a binder slid off the top shelf. It hit the floor with a thud that echoed across the quiet room. She bent to pick it up, carefully, one hand supporting her belly, only to find someone already crouching beside her. A hand reached for the same binder. She froze. Michael Murphy. Up close, he looked impossibly calm, sleeves rolled up, ties slightly loosened. The quiet authority of someone who didn't need to raise his voice. He picked up the binder and handed it to her. "You're still here." "I had work to finish," she said, steady but cautious. He nodded once, studying her expression. "Most people clock out at 6 o'clock. I'm not most people." That earned a faint, almost imperceptible smirk. "So I've noticed." He turned toward the shelves, scanning the room. "How's the system down here treating you?" She hesitated. "It's old, but it works." A pause. "Like most good things," he said quietly. It was the kind of line that could have sounded arrogant from another man, but his tone made it contemplative. Hannah found herself searching his face for mockery and found none. "I should let you finish," he said finally. "Don't stay too late. You need rest." The last words carried a weight that made her wonder if he'd noticed her condition or was simply being kind. As he walked away, the faint scent of coffee lingered in his wake. When the elevator doors closed behind him, Hannah exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath the entire time. That night, back in her apartment, Hannah powered up her laptop to check her temp schedule. Among the system notifications, one message stood out from Hardy at Montgomeryan.com. Subject, follow-up. Her stomach tightened. She clicked. "Miss Reynolds, I reviewed your work on the internal operations files today. You have an eye for detail and organization, both valuable traits here. Keep at it." Hardy. She stared at the screen for a long moment. No sarcasm, no hidden jab, just acknowledgement. It shouldn't have meant anything, but it did. She typed a short reply. "Thank you, sir. I'll do my best." Then deleted it. Typed again. Noted. Deleted that too. Finally, she closed the laptop, deciding silence was safer. The next morning, she arrived earlier than anyone else. The halls smelled of fresh coffee and cleaning solvent. Her workstation light flickered on as she booted the computer. Beside the keyboard sat a small paper cup. Hot, untouched, no note attached, just steam curling in the quiet air. Hannah looked around the empty room. No one there. She smiled, the smallest hint of one, and sat down to work, one hand absently resting on her belly where the baby kicked in response. The next few days passed like slow-moving film reels, fluorescent light, paper dust, and the rhythmic click of keyboards echoing through the basement. Hannah had learned to tune out everything except the hum of the ventilation system. Each morning she arrived earlier than anyone else. Each night she left later, though never too late. The baby needed her to rest. She'd stopped thinking about the slap, the embarrassment, or even the rejection email that followed. But every time she sat down at her desk, the memory of that paper cup of coffee, still warm, still unexplained, whispered that maybe she wasn't invisible after all. "Morning, sunshine," called Diane, her co-worker with the silver glasses as Hannah logged in. "Morning," Hannah replied, faint smile. Diane glanced at her stack of files. "You're making us look bad. Nobody finishes that much by week's end." Hannah shrugged. "It's quieter when I work alone." Diane smirked. "Careful. That's how they trap you here forever." By noon, Hannah had fallen into rhythm. Scan, tag, file, repeat. But she noticed something, small patterns no one else seemed to care about. Misfiled contracts, duplicate entries. Each time she corrected one, she made a mental note. The system wasn't broken, just neglected, and somehow fixing it felt like rebuilding a small piece of her own dignity. Late afternoon, the basement door opened with a hiss of hydraulic air. Footsteps, polished, steady. Michael Murphy appeared again, crisp as ever, a folder in hand. The room shifted instantly. Diane straightened. Someone minimized their solitaire window. "Mr. Hardy," Diane greeted quickly. "Good afternoon," he replied, scanning the room before his gaze found Hannah. He approached her desk. I need the 2019 vendor files, he said simply. They're under procurement, Archive C, top shelf, Hannah answered before he finished. But that index hasn't been updated since April. He paused, one eyebrow slightly raised. You've been through those? Yes. The digital log doesn't match the hard copies. I've been cross-referencing. For a second, his expression softened, approval flickering beneath the surface. Good, he said. Keep doing that. He retrieved the folder, but didn't walk away. Instead, he looked around the dimly lit space. When was the last time anyone from upper management came down here? He asked quietly. Diane laughed under her breath. Never, sir. We're like the company's basement ghosts. Michael gave a small nod, half amused, half thoughtful, and left without another word. When the door closed, Diane exhaled dramatically. Was that the Michael Murphy? The Michael Murphy you? Yes, Hannah cut in quickly. Please don't finish that sentence. Diane grinned. Okay. But he definitely remembered you. You could feel it. Hannah ignored her, focusing on her screen. But the truth was, Diane wasn't wrong. She had felt it. That slight shift in air pressure, the invisible thread of awareness neither of them wanted to tug. Later that night, while cataloging, Hannah noticed something odd. A set of financial reports, marked confidential, CEO review only, had been misfiled in a random archive box. She hesitated, tempted to ignore it, but the document's cover bore Michael Murphy's digital signature. Her instincts as an organized person, and maybe as someone trying to redeem herself, overrode her fear. She sent a short message through the internal mail system. Subject: misfiled records flagged for review. Body: found a set of restricted files in Archive C, Section 4, likely misplaced during the digital transfer. Refiled correctly. S. Reynolds. She didn't expect a reply, but 2 minutes later, her inbox pinged. From mhardy@montgomeryan.com. Message: a good eye catches what others miss. Thank you. MC. Hannah read it twice, then 3 times. A warmth spread in her chest that had nothing to do with recognition and everything to do with being seen. The next morning, she caught the elevator just as the doors were closing and walked straight into him. Good morning, Michael said, holding the door open. Morning, she murmured, pressing the button for the basement. He was heading up. She was going down. The moment stretched, silent, awkward, but charged. About that report, he began. You caught an error my entire analytics team missed. Hannah blinked. I just noticed the naming mismatch. That's exactly what they should have noticed, he said simply. Good work. The doors slid open at the lobby floor. Before stepping out, he added, details matter. You have a talent for them. Don't waste it down there forever. Then he was gone. She stood frozen, the elevator doors closing again, carrying her downward. For the first time, the basement didn't feel like punishment. It felt like potential. That night, while sorting the last stack, the lights flickered, motion sensors trying to save electricity. She waved a hand, and they blinked back on. The baby kicked, as if agreeing it was time to go home. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Don't forget to go home before midnight. MC. Hannah frowned. How did he even get my number? But when she glanced at the clock, 11:42 p.m., she couldn't help but smile. She powered down the system, grabbed her coat, and left. As she exited, she passed the glass atrium. From above, through the darkened executive windows, a single office light still glowed. She didn't have to guess whose. Morning crept into the city like watercolor light, soft, uncertain. Inside Montgomery Industries, the world woke to the scent of fresh espresso and printer ink. Hannah arrived before sunrise as usual. Her reflection passed through the glass doors, tired, determined, visibly pregnant, and a little braver than yesterday. The operations division was still and dim. She hung her coat, powered up her computer, and sipped from the same plain paper cup of coffee she now brought for herself. Decaf, doctor's orders. Though part of her still half expected to find one waiting. Upstairs, Michael Murphy stood at his window, tie still undone. Below, through 18 floors of glass, And steel, he could just make out the faint glow from the basement windows. He admired persistence. He'd built an empire on it. But what unsettled him about Hannah Reynolds wasn't her work ethic. It was her quiet refusal to shrink. Most people avoided him. She didn't. She feared him once. Yes, that slap proved it. But she hadn't begged, apologized, or flattered. She simply worked. And that, more than anything, got under his skin. At 8:20 a.m., the elevator doors opened behind her. Hannah looked up from the scanner. Michael stood there, holding a folder and 2 coffees. He didn't say good morning. He just placed one on her desk, clearly decaf, the cup marked with a small D. "You're early again," he said, calm, almost conversational. "So are you," she replied. He gave a small, wry smile. Occupational hazard. Then, noticing the mountain of files beside her, he added, "Do they always dump this much on one person?" She shrugged. "Probably figured I owed the company a few hours after the incident." He froze, just long enough for her to notice. Then quietly, "You mean the slap?" She swallowed. "Yes, sir." For a moment, silence settled between them. Not heavy, just human. Then he surprised her. "It was a good one," he said simply. "Precise. Didn't even leave a mark." She blinked, startled into a laugh. "That's not exactly a compliment." He shrugged, the ghost of humor softening his face. "Could have been worse. You could have missed." The laugh that escaped her was small, but real. For the first time, they both smiled at the same moment. He watched her type a note into the database. Her movements were quick, efficient, focused. "What were you doing before this?" he asked. "I was a project coordinator at a small consulting firm," she replied. "Small place, family run." "Why leave?" "They closed." He nodded, eyes lowering to her hands. Ink smudge on one knuckle, nails clean, unpolished. "Hey, worker's hands, not a dreamer's. You deserve a better position than this," he said. She shook her head. "Maybe this is what I need. Somewhere quiet. No spotlights." He studied her for a moment longer. "Spotlights don't create people, Miss Reynolds. They just show who's already there." He left her with that, a sentence that stayed long after his footsteps faded. That evening, rain turned the city into glass. Thunder rolled low and distant while Hannah stayed late, finalizing the month's backlog. At 9:10 p.m., the power flickered. The overhead lights blinked out, leaving only the glow of her monitor and the dim green exit sign. She stood, stretching her stiff shoulders, carefully, mindful of her balance, and heard footsteps. Again, she turned. Michael was standing by the door, umbrella dripping, suit damp from the storm. "Still here?" he asked. "Someone's got to finish the 2019 records." He glanced at the dark ceiling. "You work well in blackouts?" "I adapt." That answer made him smile. Faint, but genuine. He took off his jacket, draped it over the back of a chair, and rolled up his sleeves. "Show me. How to help." Her eyes widened. "You're serious?" "Don't worry. I can alphabetize." For the next 20 minutes, they worked side by side under the soft light of her monitor. The CEO and the pregnant temp, sorting paper in silence. Outside, rain hammered the windows. Inside, time seemed to slow, steady, almost comfortable. When the lights finally flickered back on, she caught him watching her. Not in authority, but curiosity. "What?" she asked softly. He shook his head. "Nothing. Just realizing I haven't worked this quietly in years." She smiled. "Maybe you should visit the basement more often." He chuckled under his breath. "Maybe I will." When she finally stood to leave, he handed her his jacket. "You forgot this," she said. "Keep it," he replied. "You'll need it more than I do. It's still raining." Before she could argue, he was already gone, the door closing softly behind him. She stared at the jacket for a long moment before slipping it on. The fabric was still warm, faintly, scented of cedar and coffee. She stepped outside into the night. The rain had softened to mist. City lights blurred through it, like watercolor strokes. And for the first time since that humiliating slap, Hannah Reynolds smiled, not out of defiance, not from pride, but from something gentler, something like beginning again. The following week unfolded like a quiet current, steady on the surface, charged underneath. Hannah filed, sorted, typed, smiled when spoken to, and kept her distance. But distance meant little when every morning brought the same sound. The elevator opening, Michael Murphy, stepping out with 2 coffees in hand. He never explained. She never asked. Somehow that unspoken rhythm became the safest language between them. By Tuesday, the whispers had started. "He's been down there every day," Diane murmured while logging invoices. "Since when does the CEO check operations in person?" Hannah didn't look up. "Maybe he likes paper dust. Or maybe he likes you," Diane said, smirking. Hannah shot her a warning look. "Don't start." But she couldn't deny it. His visits were becoming impossible to ignore. Sometimes he'd stand quietly behind her, reading over a file. Other times he'd bring up small talk about logistics, systems, or mention how inefficient the filing network was. "We'll fix that someday," he'd say absently, like a man half-talking to himself. Each time his tone was calm, precise, but softer now, as though the slap that had once drawn a line between them had somehow erased one instead. On Wednesday, she caught him waiting by the copier. He looked up from his phone. "I had a question about that audit trail you mentioned." "Which one?" she asked. "The old supplier contracts. You said there were inconsistencies." "Yes. The older database shows missing entries between 2018 and 2020, likely from a transfer bug. I'm rebuilding it manually." He nodded, studying her in that analytical way of his. "You've been doing all that alone?" She hesitated. "Mostly." Michael's tone softened. "Then I owe you coffee again." Her lips parted, surprise flickering before she caught herself. "You don't owe me anything." He tilted his head. "That's debatable." The elevator doors opened just then, and he stepped in. Before the doors closed, he added, quietly, "You might want to take a break once in a while. People who work this hard usually have something to prove." The words lingered long after he was gone. That evening, rain streaked the windows again, a déjà vu she couldn't quite name. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly, reflecting in puddles along the hallway. Hannah finished logging the last of her reports and leaned back, rubbing her temples. The baby shifted, a gentle reminder to slow down. Her reflection in the dark monitor looked older somehow. Not from time, but from carrying too much silence. When the elevator chimed behind her, she didn't turn. "I'm done for the day," she said, assuming it was Diane. A quiet voice replied. "Then why are you still here?" She froze, recognizing him instantly. Michael leaned against the doorway. No tie, sleeves rolled, a familiar calm shadowing his face. "I was just finishing this section," she said quickly. He walked closer. "You've said that every night this week. I like finishing what I start." He nodded, stopping beside her desk. "I know the type." Then softer, "It's what built this company." For a moment, the storm outside became a mirror, 2 people reflected in the glass, both haunted by ambition that had cost them something personal. "Do you ever stop working?" she asked quietly. His smile was brief. "I tried once. It didn't go well." "Why not?" "I realized I didn't know who I was without it." That honesty caught her off guard. He wasn't a man given to confession. "Maybe that's why you come down here," she said after a pause. "To remember what it's like to build things by hand." He looked at her, a long, searching look, then said softly, "Maybe." Neither spoke after that. The silence wasn't uncomfortable this time. It hummed between them, steady as the rain. When she finally shut down her computer, he stepped forward, wordless, and picked up the heavy archive box she'd been reaching for. "I'll take that," he said simply. She followed him toward the elevator, unsure why her heart was beating so fast. When the doors closed, she found herself standing beside him in the faint hum of machinery and the smell of rain-soaked wool. She didn't speak. Neither did he. But in that moment, she realized silence could say more than any apology ever could. As the elevator opened, he turned slightly toward her. "Hannah," he said quietly. This time, her name deliberate. "Careful." She looked up. "Yes. I was wrong about something," he said. "About what?" He hesitated, then with a faint half-smile. "That slap? Maybe I deserved it." Before she could respond, the door slid shut again, leaving her standing alone in the hallway. Jacket over her arm, pulse still racing, one hand instinctively resting on her belly. Outside, the rain had stopped. Inside, something else had started. Rumors move faster than facts inside glass buildings. By the end of the week, the whispers that started in the basement had reached the 15th floor. Hardy's been spending time downstairs with the new girl. Must be something about her. Hannah didn't have to hear every word. She could feel them, the glances, the sudden quiet. Whenever she entered the room, and the way laughter seemed to fade just a second too late. Friday morning, she stood alone in the elevator, folder pressed against her chest. As the doors opened on the executive floor, two assistants stepped in mid-conversation. I'm telling you, I saw him hand her coffee himself. No way. Michael Murphy doesn't even carry his own lunch. Maybe she's related to someone. Or maybe. The sentence died when they realized she was there. Hannah kept her eyes fixed on the panel lights. The doors opened on the basement, and she stepped out without a word. She could still feel their stares long after the elevator closed. Downstairs, the air felt heavier. Or maybe that was just her. She opened the blinds a little wider, letting the morning light in. Diane noticed, trying to let God see what kind of punishment they've given you. Something like that, Hannah said quietly, powering on the computer. But even Diane's jokes couldn't mask the unease. By noon, 3 people had stopped by with urgent files that somehow required Michael Murphy's initials, the same initials they knew she now had access to. It was subtle, petty, and completely human. At 3 p.m., the elevator doors opened again. Michael stepped out, casual, no tie, sleeves rolled. He carried 2 cups of coffee as always. The room fell silent. He seemed to sense it immediately, his gaze flicking across the staff before settling on her. Miss Reynolds, he said evenly. Could I see the updated vendor archive? Her heart pounded, but she kept her tone steady. Yes, sir. I have it right here. He accepted the folder. Good. Let's review it upstairs. Diane's eyebrows shot up. Upstairs. Michael didn't flinch. Is that a problem? No, sir. Diane said quickly, returning to her screen. Hannah followed him to the elevator under a dozen silent eyes. The elevator doors opened to a space that looked like a different world, quiet, expansive, flooded with afternoon light. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Austin skyline like a painting. Michael gestured toward the conference room. In here. She hesitated at the threshold, feeling the weight of the glass walls, the muted footsteps of people who earned 10 times her salary. He noticed. You can breathe, he said softly. They're just people with better desks. It was meant as a joke, but something in his tone made her look up. He wasn't teasing. He was reassuring. They reviewed the files in silence for a few minutes. His questions were sharp, efficient, but she answered each with quiet precision. When they finished, he leaned back, studying her expression. You're handling this well, he said. Handling what? The noise. The looks. Her breath caught. So you've heard? I hear everything, he replied. And I don't like what I've heard. She folded her hands. It's fine. I've had worse. He shook his head. That doesn't make it acceptable. For a long moment, neither spoke. Outside, clouds drifted across the city like slow ships. Then Michael said quietly, For what it's worth, I don't care what they say. Hannah exhaled. You should. You're the CEO. He smiled faintly. And you are the one person in this building who doesn't treat me like one. That landed heavier than she expected. She looked away. That's because you're human. He studied her for a long time before replying. Most people forget that. When she returned to the basement, Diane was waiting. So, she said, arms crossed. You and the boss having a board meeting up there? Hannah shook her head. He just wanted to review files. Uh-huh, Diane said, unconvinced. You know how this looks, right? I know, Hannah said. And I don't care. But the truth was, she did care, not because of what they said, but because of how easily it could be misunderstood. She didn't want to be another rumor in a company that ate its own stories for breakfast. She wanted to be respected. And if she was honest, though she'd never say it aloud, she wanted him to see her without pity or pretense. That night, as she packed up her desk, she noticed something new. A sticky note on her monitor. Ignore the noise. The people who whisper have never built anything real. MC. Hannah smiled despite herself. Then she took the note, folded it once, and slipped it into her notebook. Outside, the city pulsed with Friday night life. Laughter, headlights, music. But inside the quiet basement, 2 cups of empty coffee sat side by side on the desk, steam long gone, but warmth still lingering. The city never really slept. Even at midnight, Montgomery Industries' glass tower glowed faintly against the Austin skyline, a lighthouse of ambition that refused to dim. On the 19th floor, Michael Murphy sat alone in his office. The glow of his monitor cast pale light across the desk where a half-drunk cup of coffee had gone cold hours ago. He'd finished his reports, signed approvals, and closed meetings that could have waited until morning. Still, he stayed, not because of the work, but because somewhere below, in the operations basement, a light was still on. Downstairs, Hannah hadn't noticed the time. Her world had narrowed to one thing: the endless stream of scanned documents that refused to align perfectly. She rubbed her eyes, adjusted the paper, tried again. The hum of the scanner had become almost hypnotic. When the clock finally struck 1, she leaned back, exhaustion settling into her bones. Her coffee was gone, her sandwich untouched. The baby kicked, a gentle protest against her working so late. She meant to rest for just a minute, but her head found her folded arms, and the next sound she heard wasn't the scanner. It was the faint click of the elevator door. Michael stepped into the dark hallway, his shoes echoing softly against polished concrete. The basement smelled faintly of ink, paper, and something quieter, dedication left overnight. He followed the glow of a single desk lamp. There she was, Hannah Reynolds, asleep at her desk, her hand still resting on the mouse, the monitor filled with half-finished work. One hand was draped protectively over her belly. The sight stopped him. It wasn't the fatigue that struck him. It was the stillness. In a building full of people chasing promotions, she was the only one chasing completion, while carrying a life inside her. He walked closer, careful not to wake her. The thin light traced the curve of her cheek, the loose strands of hair that had escaped her clip, the ink smudged near her wrist. For a man used to noise, meetings, applause, deadlines, the silence around her felt like something sacred. He looked around for something, a gesture, small, unspoken. Then he saw his own coat folded over a nearby chair. Without thinking, he lifted it and placed it gently over her shoulders. The fabric settled like a word never spoken. She stirred slightly, but didn't wake. For a moment, his hand hovered above her desk, as if to fix a loose strand of hair. But he stopped. Instead, he whispered, barely audible, "You don't know how rare this is." He wasn't sure what he meant. Her focus, her honesty, or simply her presence. Maybe all of it. Michael stood there longer than he should have, long enough to realize that something inside him, something locked since his divorce, since the years of relentless self-control, had shifted. Not attraction, not yet. Something quieter, a kind of respect he hadn't felt in years. He turned off the lamp, leaving just the monitor's glow to cradle her sleeping face. Then he left, his own reflection disappearing into the dark glass of the elevator door. Hannah woke to sunlight. Her neck ached. Her laptop screen was black, and something heavy rested on her shoulders. When she saw the coat, she froze. It was the same one Michael had left behind days ago, the one she'd returned to his office that morning, neatly folded. She hadn't seen it since. Now it carried the faint scent of cedar again. She looked around. No one was there. Only a sticky note placed beside her keyboard. "Go home earlier next time. The company needs its people awake, not heroic. And you need rest for 2. MC." Hannah held the note for a long moment, then folded it gently into her notebook next to the other one. One hand rested on her belly, feeling the gentle movements within. When she entered the main lobby later that morning, Michael was already there, talking with a client near reception. He caught her eye, just briefly, and gave the smallest nod, as if acknowledging a secret. She returned it with the faintest smile. Neither said a word, but something between them had changed. Not loudly, not visibly, just enough that both of them felt it. And for the first time, Hannah realized that not all misunderstandings begin with anger. Some begin with silence. And some, if you're patient enough, with kindness. Monday mornings at Montgomery Industries were usually predictable. The sound of heels on marble, the faint scent of roasted espresso, and the constant buzz of ambition. But this Monday felt different. Not to everyone. Just to two people who now shared a silence that said more than words could. Hannah arrived early. The sun had barely cleared the skyline, yet Michael's office light was already on. When she stepped in to deliver the reports, he looked up from his screen. "You're here early," he said. She offered a small, polite smile. "Habit." He leaned back slightly. "You have too many of those." She hesitated at the doorway. "You left your coat," she said, almost casually. He nodded. It looked better there. For a heartbeat, neither moved. The air felt charged, fragile, unspoken. "Finally," she said softly, "thank you." "For what?" "For not making me feel stupid for caring." He met her eyes. "Hannah, if there were more people who cared like you do, this company wouldn't need fixing." The sentence lingered like warmth from a forgotten fire. By noon, the gossip machine had woken up again, as it always did. "She's been in his office twice this week. Maybe she's getting promoted. Maybe she's getting fired." Hannah heard none of it. She was too focused on the new system Michael had asked her to help test, digitizing the company's aging archives. He could have assigned it to anyone, but he hadn't. Now she found herself working between two worlds, the basement where she belonged and the glass offices above where she didn't. Every time she climbed those stairs, she told herself it was just work. Every time she saw him, she stopped believing it. That afternoon, he appeared beside her desk with a folder in hand. "I need your input on something," he said. She blinked. "My input? You're the only one who's actually touched these files," he replied. "And I don't trust anyone who signs off on data they've never seen." He placed a coffee beside her, decaf, without comment. She didn't thank him, not out of rudeness, but because it had become their language. As they reviewed the files, their hands brushed once, just barely, over a shared page. Neither looked up, but both felt it. When the work was done, Michael closed the folder and said, "You know, people think leadership is about authority. It isn't." She glanced at him. "What is it then?" "Attention," he said. "To people, to the details no one else notices." Her voice softened. "You must have missed a lot then." He smiled faintly. "You don't hold back, do you? You hired me to be honest." "I did," he said. Then after a pause, "And I don't regret it." Something flickered behind his words, an admission disguised as professionalism. Hannah looked away, pretending to sort the files. "Careful, Mr. Hardy." That almost sounded like a compliment. "It was," he said. Almost. Their laughter, soft, genuine, startled them both. The following days blurred together, a rhythm they hadn't planned but couldn't ignore. Emails turned into hallway check-ins. Check-ins became working lunches. Working lunches turned into quiet conversations that didn't need to end. It wasn't romance. Not yet. It was something more dangerous. Understanding. One evening as Hannah was about to leave, she caught Michael standing by the window, looking out at the skyline. He spoke without turning. "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" She frowned. "The company?" "No. The life you built before you knew who you really were." She hesitated, then answered truthfully. "All the time." He nodded. "I still own the city. That's how I ended up here, trying to prove to everyone that success means control." "And does it?" He turned then, his expression stripped of all pretense. "No. It means isolation. I just didn't realize it soon enough." The honesty hung in the air, heavy, raw, unexpected. Hannah didn't know what to say, so she didn't. She simply stood beside him, the city lights reflecting across the glass, their silhouettes nearly touching. When she finally gathered her bag, she noticed something on her desk, a small black notebook, new, unmarked. She opened it. Inside, a single note written in careful script. "For when the world gets too loud. MC." Beneath the line was a single hand-drawn coffee cup. She laughed quietly, shaking her head, and though she couldn't explain it, the air in that office felt lighter than it had in years. Some shifts happen loudly, like glass shattering. Others happen in silence, invisible at first, until one day you realize everything has already moved. For Hannah and Michael, it began with something small, a phone call she tried to ignore. It was Thursday, nearly 7. Most of the building had gone dark, except for the faint glow from the operations office where Hannah sat reviewing digital scans. Her phone buzzed once, twice, a name flashing across the screen. Felix. She silenced it instinctively, but when it rang again, Michael looked up from across the table. Someone's persistent, he said lightly. She forced a smile. It's just my boyfriend. Something subtle changed in his face. Not quite surprise, not quite disappointment, just a flicker, then gone. Ah, he said simply, turning back to the screen. I didn't realize you were seeing someone. It's been a while, she said, her voice quiet. He travels a lot. Michael nodded, but the silence that followed carried a weight neither of them acknowledged. After that night, something shifted. Not dramatically, just enough that she felt it every time she walked into the room. Michael was still polite, professional, composed, but the ease between them, the small glances, the quiet rhythm, had changed. Now he checked his watch more often. Now she spoke less. Even Diane noticed. Did you two have a fight or something? She asked one afternoon. Hannah frowned. He's my boss, not my. She didn't finish the sentence. Right, Diane said, not buying it. But for a boss, he sure looked like someone who cared when he didn't show up for lunch. Hannah busied herself with the copier. You're imagining things. Maybe, Diane said, smiling faintly. Or maybe I'm just good at reading people. Hannah didn't reply because deep down she already knew Diane was right. That evening, Michael walked past the break room and paused. Through the glass wall, he saw Hannah on the phone, her back to him, her voice low. I said I'm fine, Felix. You don't need to worry. Yes, I've been busy. No, it's not. She stopped, closing her eyes briefly. I'm just tired, that's all. Her tone wasn't defensive, just weary. He turned away before she noticed him, the echo of her words following him down the hall. He shouldn't care. He told himself that again and again, like an equation he couldn't balance. But logic had stopped working the day he saw her asleep at that desk. At the weekly staff briefing, Michael barely spoke. He delegated. He nodded. He kept his voice even. But when Hannah entered late, carrying reports, his attention shifted involuntarily. She caught the glance, brief, unreadable, and felt something twist inside her. When the meeting ended, he was gone before she could say a word. Only his pen remained on the table, his initials engraved in silver. She hesitated, then picked it up, intending to return it. But when she reached his office, the door was closed. Through the frosted glass, she could hear him speaking on the phone. No, that's not necessary. Tell them to reschedule. I have another matter to deal with. He sounded tired, not angry, just drained. For the first time, she wondered if she'd become that matter. That weekend, Felix surprised her with dinner reservations. You've been buried in work, he said. I want one evening that's just us. She agreed, trying to sound enthusiastic. But halfway through the meal, her phone buzzed. Hey, company email alert from Montgomery Industries. She read it out of habit. It was from Michael. A late-night update about the digitization rollout. One line at the bottom caught her eye. Excellent progress this week. Please take Sunday off. MC. Felix noticed her smile. Work again. Hannah sat down her phone. Just a note. He leaned back, half joking. From the guy you talk about without realizing it? She froze. What's that supposed to mean? Felix laughed. Relax. I'm just saying, you light up when you mention your boss. I haven't seen that look in months. Don't be ridiculous. She looked away. Don't misunderstand. There's nothing between me and him. But the accusation hung there, unspoken and true, in ways neither wanted to admit. That night, rain battered her apartment windows. The same kind of rain she remembered from the day everything started. She tried to sleep, but couldn't. Her thoughts kept circling the same image. Michael standing at that glass wall, silent, watching the city like it might offer an answer he'd never found. The baby shifted inside her, a gentle reminder of the life she was building, the complications. She was navigating. For the first time since she started at Montgomery Industries, she wasn't sure which part of her life felt real, the one she'd built with Felix or the one that existed quietly between the lines of her job. When her phone buzzed again, she didn't have to check the screen to know who it was. Stay dry. Roads might flood tonight. MC. It was nothing more than a courtesy, but it undid her all the same. Saturday night in downtown Austin, the streets shimmered with neon and drizzle, every puddle reflecting the hum of the city. Alive, careless, and cruelly indifferent. Hannah wasn't supposed to be there. She told herself she just needed air, a distraction, something other than the noise in her head. She'd left the apartment restless, too unsettled to stay home. And somehow her feet carried her into the same district where Felix liked to unwind with his colleagues. She almost turned back. Almost. Inside the bar, warm light spilled across polished wood and laughter. Hannah paused near the doorway, her pulse suddenly loud. One hand instinctively rested on her belly. There he was, Felix. Same suit, same careless grin, but not the same woman. The girl beside him leaned close, her hand on his arm, whispering something that made him laugh. That low, familiar laugh Hannah once loved because it used to belong to her. For a moment, she couldn't move. The music, the crowd, even the air seemed to thin around her. Then the girl leaned in and kissed him. Quick, familiar, undeniable. And everything inside Hannah went quiet. Her hand tightened around her water bottle. The plastic crinkled softly, the only sound she heard. She took one slow step forward, then another, moving through the crowd until she stood just a few feet away. Felix looked up. The color drained from his face. Hannah. The water bottle came up first, then the water hit him, the entire contents splashing across his shirt and the woman's shocked expression. Gasps. Murmurs. Cameras rising. Hannah didn't wait to see his reaction. She didn't want his excuses. Her chest burned. Her hands shook. But her voice, when it came, was steady. Now you look as ridiculous as you made me feel. And then she turned and walked away, one hand protectively over her belly. Outside, the air was cold and biting. She didn't notice the drizzle had turned to rain. She just walked, fast, aimless, until her footsteps echoed across the slick pavement. Hannah. She froze. The voice was deeper, steadier, familiar. Michael Murphy. He stood under the awning of the next building, half-shadowed by street light. He must have seen the whole thing. For a second, neither spoke. Only the sound of rain filled the space between them. I shouldn't have, she began, but her voice broke. He stepped closer. You don't owe him calm. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away. He lied for months. I kept defending him. She stopped, trembling. Michael didn't say anything. He just reached into his coat pocket and held out a folded handkerchief, clean, white, deliberate. She didn't take it at first. Then she did. Their fingers brushed, just briefly, but it was enough. Come on, he said softly. You shouldn't be out here alone. I don't want to go home. Then don't. He glanced toward the corner where a small neon sign flickered over the river's edge. Down there, there's a bar by the water. Quiet place. You'll like it. She hesitated. He waited. Then she nodded. They walked in silence, two silhouettes beneath the same umbrella, the city lights glimmering on. Wet pavement, the sound of rain mixing with the distant hum of traffic. The bar sat under a rusted awning, half hidden behind a row of docked boats. Inside it was warm and dim, lit by amber bulbs strung above wooden beams. Old jazz hummed through the speakers, soft enough to let silence breathe. Michael found a corner booth near the window overlooking the river. The bartender gave him a knowing nod. 2 waters, Michael said, glancing at Hannah. Then, and 1 herbal tea. When the drinks arrived, Hannah traced the condensation on her glass with her fingertip before lifting it. I thought you were a coffee man, she murmured. Tonight calls for something gentler. They sat across from each other. No office, no titles, no rumors, just 2 tired people, pretending they weren't broken. After a long silence, Michael finally spoke. You didn't deserve that. Hannah laughed softly, bitterly. Maybe I did. Maybe I knew all along. No, he said firmly. You hoped all along. That's different. She looked up, meeting his gaze. There was no pity there, only recognition. He added quietly, people like us, we work too hard, care too much, and let the wrong ones take advantage of that. Her voice was barely a whisper. And what happens when we finally stop pretending it doesn't hurt? Michael didn't answer. He just raised his glass slightly. To finally stopping. She mirrored the gesture. To finally stopping. Outside, the river caught the reflection of passing headlights, streaks of gold bending with the current. Hannah leaned back, eyes distant. I spent 3 years convincing myself he loved me, that if I worked harder, smiled more, forgave faster, he'd notice. Michael watched her, the honesty, the exhaustion, the strength hidden beneath the trembling. Maybe he never noticed, he said softly. But I did. She looked up, startled. He held her gaze, steady, grounded, and for once, she didn't look away. No one spoke after that. They didn't need to. The rain outside softened to mist. Inside, 2 glasses, 1 water, 1 tea, caught the glow of the bar lights, standing side by side like quiet witnesses to something neither of them was ready to name. Outside, the rain had slowed to a whisper. Drops clung to the window like faint constellations, distorting the river lights into trembling streaks of gold. Inside, the bar was quiet except for the low hum of jazz and the soft clinking of glasses. Hannah sat across from Michael, her elbows resting on the table, her eyes distant, still, somewhere between anger and disbelief. Neither spoke for a while. Silence had become their safest language. When Hannah finally broke the silence, her voice was low, hoarse. I keep thinking, if I just stayed home tonight, maybe none of this would have happened. Michael's gaze stayed steady. It would have. Sooner or later, truth doesn't wait for permission. She huffed a soft, humorless laugh. You sound like someone who's learned that the hard way. I have, he said simply. She looked at him then. Really looked. There was no trace of the cold so everyone whispered about. Just a man who understood what it meant to lose something you thought you could control. She exhaled slowly, tracing the rim of her glass with one finger. Do you ever get tired of pretending everything's fine? He nodded once. Every day. And you still show up. Every morning, he said. Because that's what survival looks like when you're not ready to call it healing. Her lips parted, surprised at how easily his words mirrored what she'd never dared to say aloud. I spent 3 years thinking if I just stayed patient enough, Felix would remember who we were. But tonight, seeing him with her, I think I finally realized he already forgot. Michael didn't interrupt. He knew some things weren't meant to be comforted, just heard. After a long pause, he said quietly, You don't have to be perfect to be loved, Hannah. You just have to be seen. Her breath caught. It was the kind of sentence that didn't sound like advice. It sounded like understanding. The bartender passed by, refilling their glasses without asking. Michael raised his to endings that make room for beginnings. She hesitated. I don't think I'm ready for beginnings. That's the point, he said. They never wait for when we're ready. They drank in silence, the air between them shifting, not romantic yet, but intimate in the way. 2 people recognized the same scar. Hannah set her glass down and whispered, You didn't have to follow me. I know, he said, but I didn't want you to think you were alone in that kind of moment. She smiled faintly. And what kind of moment is that? The kind that ends something you thought defined you. Her eyes shimmered, not from tears this time, but from quiet exhaustion giving way to relief. Can I ask you something? She said. He nodded. That day in the cafeteria, she said carefully. When I slapped you. Michael couldn't help but laugh under his breath. Hard to forget. Did you ever actually hate me for that? He leaned back, his expression softening. No, but it reminded me that people still react to things they care about. Everyone else in that room looked away. You didn't. Hannah looked down, smiling despite herself. You're impossible to read. You know that? I've been told. Then tell me something real, she said, half teasing, half serious. Michael's gaze steadied. That night, the slap, the rumors, everything, it made me realize how Long I've been surrounded by people who only pretend to see me. And then you walked in. Furious, certain I was the problem. It was the first honest thing anyone had done in years. Hannah stared at him, silent, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Honesty, she said softly, isn't supposed to hurt that much. Sometimes, he replied. That's how you know it's real. The night deepened outside. The river carried the city's reflection away in ripples, breaking the light into pieces that looked almost like forgiveness. Hannah leaned back, eyes half closed, the tension finally leaving her shoulders. One hand rested on her belly, feeling the gentle movements within. Michael watched her, saying nothing, just letting her breathe. When she opened her eyes again, he wasn't looking at the river anymore. He was looking at her. For a brief, fleeting second, something passed between them. Quiet, unmistakable. Not desire. Not yet, but recognition. And for the first time that night, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. When they stepped outside, the rain had stopped completely. The air smelled of wet earth and wood smoke from nearby chimneys. Michael offered her his coat again. She shook her head. You're going to run out of jackets if you keep lending them to me. He smiled, the rare kind that reached his eyes. I'll risk it. They walked along the riverbank in silence. Neither rushed to end the night. At the corner where their paths would split, Hannah stopped. Thank you, she said quietly, for not asking me to be okay. He looked at her, rainwater glistening in his hair. I wasn't planning to. She laughed softly, and for the first time that week, it sounded real. The city had gone still. It was past midnight now, and the rain left behind a silver hush over everything, the kind of quiet that makes people say what they wouldn't dare in daylight. Hannah and Michael walked side by side along the riverfront, the faint glow of street lamps trailing their shadows across the wet pavement. Neither seemed eager to say goodbye. Hannah hugged her arms to her chest, her coat draped over her shoulders. You didn't have to. Walk me home. I know, Michael said, but I wanted to. There was no politeness in his tone, just calm certainty, the kind that made her pulse quicken. Without reason. They passed a row of closed cafes, their chairs stacked neatly inside, neon signs flickering half-heartedly against the glass. You know what's strange? She said. I've walked this street 100 times, but it's never felt this quiet. That's not strange, he said. It's just the first time you're walking without waiting for someone else to catch up. She looked at him. You think that's what I've been doing? I know it, he said simply. Her laugh came out soft, tired, but genuine. You're too observant for your own good. We're not observant enough, he replied, and his gaze lingered on her a moment longer than it should have. They reached a wooden bench overlooking the river, the same spot where the city skyline broke into reflections of gold and blue. Michael stopped. Let's sit for a minute. She hesitated, then nodded. For a while, they said nothing. A boat passed under the bridge, leaving ripples that shimmered beneath the light. Hannah finally broke the silence. Do you ever regret choosing this life? He turned to her. Which one? The one where everyone looks at you like you're untouchable, but no one really knows you. He gave a small, quiet smile. Every day. She watched him, her breath catching at the rawness in his answer. It was the kind of honesty that didn't ask for sympathy, just acknowledgement. You don't talk like a CEO, she said. That's because I stopped trying to sound like one the day you slapped me. She let out a surprised laugh, covering her mouth. Oh God. He smiled faintly. You made quite an impression. The wind picked up slightly, brushing a strand of hair across her face. Without thinking, Michael reached out and tucked it gently behind her ear. The movement was small, nothing dramatic, but it lingered in the air like a pulse. Hannah looked at him. You really shouldn't be this kind, she said softly. People might think you have a heart. He met her eyes. Maybe I do. The silence after that was fragile, full of things they both knew better than to say. Hannah looked back at the river, her voice barely above a whisper. I used to think love was supposed to make you feel safe. What do you think now? I think it's supposed to make you feel seen, even when it hurts. Michael nodded slowly. That sounds like something you already lived through. She turned to him. And you? He hesitated. I built my life trying not to need anyone. Turns out that's just another way of being lonely. When they finally stood up again, the city had quieted even more. Only the hum of distant traffic and the rhythm of their footsteps filled the air. They reached her apartment building, an old brick complex with ivy climbing the walls. Michael stopped at the gate. "This is you," he said. Hannah nodded, holding his gaze. "You're a good listener, Michael." He smiled faintly. "Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation." She laughed softly, then went still. "I don't know how to thank you for tonight." "You already did," he said, "by letting me stay." She hesitated, her hand on the gate. "I don't know what happens next," she said quietly. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But maybe that's the point." They stood there for a moment. No plans, no expectations, just the stillness of shared understanding. Then Michael added, almost under his breath, "Hannah, you don't have to keep carrying what." He broke. Her eyes glistened. "Then what do I do with it?" "Give it time," he said. "And coffee. That usually helps." She smiled through the tears that finally came. "You're impossible." He shrugged. "I've heard worse." As she turned to unlock the gate, he stopped her. "Hannah." She looked back. He gestured to her trembling hand. "You can cry, you know. You don't have to earn permission for that." Her voice cracked, barely a whisper. "If I start, I might not stop." Michael's tone softened. "Then I'll wait." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. The rain, the city, the river, everything suspended. In that single act of quiet compassion. And when she finally stepped inside, closing the gate behind her, Michael didn't move for a long time. He just stood there, watching the light flicker in her window before turning back toward the river. Alone, but somehow lighter than before. The morning arrived pale and cold, a thin fog curling over the river like the ghost of last night's rain. Michael had barely slept. He'd gone home, poured himself a single glass of scotch, then watched the sun rise through floor-to-ceiling glass, the kind that made loneliness look elegant. He told himself it wasn't his place to worry, but he did. By mid-morning, his office door cracked open. Hannah stood there, hair tied back, face calm in. That careful way people use when they've already cried. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. Michael rose from behind his desk. "Always." She stepped in, shutting the door behind her, the click of the latch, soft but final. There was no trace of the chaos from the night before, only the faint smell of rain still clinging to her coat. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for last night, and for not saying, 'I told you so.'" "I would never say that," he replied. "You thought it, though." He smiled slightly. "Maybe." She sat down opposite him. "I didn't come here to talk about Felix. I need to know. Something." "Ask." She hesitated, searching his face. "Why did you bring me back? After everything, after the slap, the embarrassment, the rumors. You could have let me disappear." Michael leaned back, the faintest breath leaving him. "Because that moment told me something. About you I couldn't ignore." He crossed the room and leaned against the edge of his desk, closer now. "You're the first person in years who's looked at me and seen a man instead of a title. You didn't care who I was. You just reacted to what you thought was wrong." Her eyes flickered with guilt. "It was wrong. I humiliated you. And you reminded me I was still human enough to feel it," he said quietly. "That slap, it woke me up." Hannah blinked, uncertain whether to laugh or apologize. "That's not exactly what I was going for." "I know," he said, "but you were honest. Everyone else around here tells me what they think I want to hear. You told me what you actually saw." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the city below filled the silence like distant surf. "You think that's why you kept me here?" she asked. "Because I bruised your ego in the right way." He shook his head. "No. Because you reminded me that integrity still exists in this building, and I needed that more than I realized." Hannah stood and walked to the window. From here, the skyline looked endless, glass and steel, sharp edges catching the weak morning light. "When Felix cheated, I thought it was because I wasn't enough," she said softly. "But now I think maybe he just didn't know how to meet someone who wouldn't bend." Michael's voice came from behind her. "Then he never deserved you in the first place." She turned, half smiling, half breaking. "You say that like it's simple." "It's not," he said. It's just true. The air between them shifted, something unspoken rising to the surface like a current neither could stop. Michael exhaled slowly, as if the words had been waiting years for release. I need to tell you something, Hannah. Her pulse quickened. What? That first week you came back, I told myself I was making you work harder to teach you a lesson. But that wasn't true. He paused, his voice low. I kept finding excuses to see you too. Test if what I felt was just guilt or something worse. Her eyes widened. Michael. He took a step closer. Every time I walked past your desk, every time you looked up from those files, it stopped feeling like punishment. It started feeling like the only part of my day that mattered. She froze. Her breath caught somewhere between disbelief and something dangerously close to hope. That's not professional, she managed to whisper. No, he agreed. But it's honest. Silence. Only the muffled rhythm of rain against glass. Hannah's fingers brushed the edge of his desk, grounding herself. You can't say things like that, she said. Not after everything. Not while I'm still figuring out who I am without him. Not while I'm. Her hand instinctively moved to her belly. I'm not asking you for anything, Michael said quietly. I just needed you to know, because pretending I didn't feel it was starting to look too much like the man I used to be. Her throat tightened. And who was that? The man who watched life happen from behind glass and called it leadership. For a heartbeat, the world went still. No CEO, no employee, just two people exhausted from being strong for too long. Hannah took a breath, steady but trembling. Michael, I don't know what to do with that. You don't have to, he said. Not tonight. Not yet. Their eyes met, steady, searching, suspended in something neither could name. And then the intercom buzzed, breaking the silence. Mr. Hardy, his assistant's voice crackled. Board meeting at 10. He reached for the switch. I'll be there. When he turned back, Hannah was already by the door. She gave him a small, grateful smile, the kind that said, I heard you, even if she couldn't say anything more. And then she was gone. Michael stood in the doorway long after it closed, the echo of her footsteps still in his chest. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the office windows, too bright, too clean for the weight sitting on Hannah's chest. The city below moved in rhythm. Taxis, footsteps, phones, ringing. But inside the 19th floor of Montgomery Industries, something had shifted. She avoided Michael's floor all morning. Every corridor felt longer than it should. Every elevator chimed too loud. Her heart still echoed with his words. You reminded me I was still human enough to feel it. It wasn't love. Not yet. It was something quieter, more dangerous. Recognition. By late afternoon, she was filing documents when her phone lit up. Can we talk? Just 5 minutes. MC. She stared at the screen, then typed back, not today. Her finger hovered over send. Instead, she deleted it and closed her phone. Some things didn't need to be decided in a single day. Some truths simply needed to breathe. When the last elevator dinged and the office fell silent, she was still there, alone among the hum of fluorescent lights. Her desk was buried in paper, but her mind was elsewhere. Outside, the rain had returned, thin and steady, tracing silver paths down the glass. Then she heard it, the soft knock, the one she'd memorized without realizing. Still working? Michael's voice was quiet, careful. She didn't look up. It helps me think. He stepped closer. And what are you thinking about? She exhaled, finally meeting his eyes. About why you had to say it. Because I needed to be honest, he said. Even if it complicated everything. It did, she said softly. But maybe that's what makes it real. Michael leaned against the doorframe, sleeves rolled, the look of a man who'd spent the whole day pretending he hadn't said what he said. I don't expect anything from you, Hannah, he said. But I don't regret it. She studied him, searching for arrogance, found none. Only sincerity, stripped of defense. Do you ever wish we'd met somewhere else? She asked. Not in a cafeteria full of witnesses. Not under the worst misunderstanding of my life. He smiled faintly. If we hadn't, you wouldn't have slapped me. She laughed, shaking her head. That's not exactly the beginning most people dream about. Maybe not, he said. But it's ours. She looked at him for a long time and realized something quiet but undeniable. She wasn't angry anymore. Not at him, not at Felix, not even at herself. Pain had stopped being punishment. It had become proof she'd survived. "Michael," she said, "I think I'm done running from what hurts." He nodded once. "Good. That's usually where healing starts." A pause, then softly. "Do you still want that coffee you once offered me?" His surprise broke into a slow, warm smile. "I thought you'd never ask." They ended up in the break room, just the two of them, long past midnight. He brewed it. Himself, sleeves rolled, tie undone, movements unhurried. Steam rose between them like a quiet truce. No grand confessions this time, no apologies left to make. When he handed her the cup, decaf, their fingers brushed, a small, unspoken acknowledgement of everything they'd lived through to arrive at this moment. "2 cups," he said softly. "Just like the first day." She smiled. "Except this time I know who I'm talking to." He raised his cup. "Then let's start there." They drank in silence. The city lights blinked outside the window, the world still turning as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But it had. Later, when Hannah stood to leave, Michael reached out, not to stop her, but to steady her coat. On her shoulder. "Hannah," he said quietly, "next time you misunderstand me." She looked back, smiling. "I'll let you explain before I hit you." He laughed, the kind of laugh that sounded like it hadn't existed in him for years. As she walked out into the soft night rain, she turned once more. Through the glass wall, Michael was still there, watching, coffee cup in hand, a mirror of the moment that started it all. 2 cups, 2 people, no titles, no armor, just the quiet promise of something real. Sometimes forgiveness begins with a single honest moment and 2 cups of coffee. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and subscribe for more emotional stories. New tales of hope, redemption, and unexpected connections are coming soon. Stay inspired.